Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcin Dabrowski. I'm from Delft University of Technology, working in the Department of Urbanism in the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment. And I'll be chairing this session today. And also, I have a number of co-hosts of this meeting and also speakers. The content of the session was prepared by more people than the number of speakers today. So maybe I just introduce briefly everyone. So Gilda Beruti will be also with us, presenting part of the work on this circular economy transitions assessment from UNINA in Naples. Victor Vario is also here. He'll be managing the technical side of things, but also presenting part of the information on the tool. Andreas Obersteig from Hafen City University is here with us as well, and he will be one of the speakers. And also two other people who were involved in the work on this tool are Alexander Wandel from also the same department as myself, but in Delft, and Ariane Akke, so our partner from OVAM in Belgium. What we're going to do today, Victor, if you could bring in the next slide, please. I'll show you the outline of the session. Seeing this full screen, also maybe you will have to click yourselves on the little window so that to enlarge it to make this kind of the main view.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'll continue then. So this is the outline of the session today. Apologies for those technical difficulties. I will briefly introduce the topic and the tool that we have elaborated. Then we will dive into it. We will discuss the different elements of that tool, and different speakers will then come in. And we will engage you also in a question and answer at the end of this part. Then, if needed, we can take a quick break if you want to refuel with coffee or other beverage. And the last part of the session will be dedicated to discussion on the barriers for transition towards circular economy and means to overcome them. And we would like to kind of engage you actively in this, well, using Mentimeter, but we can also use the chat and then have a question and answer and discussion session at the end. So I hope that this is clear for everyone. Right, to introduce the topic. Why do we want to, well, first enact the transition, why this is a challenge, and why do we need to measure this? So I think that all of you taking part in this session and in this conference probably realized that moving on towards circular economy is an extremely challenging endeavor. And it's challenging because everyone agrees that we should do it, but at the same time, there's no template to do it. There's a lot of novel elements of circular economy that require, for example, a new business model, rethinking the governance models, new sustainability assessment methods, as we discussed this morning, new kinds of data mapping tools, governance structures, and also regulations and policies to incentivize and support change. Also, what is new with circular economy is the complexity of this challenge. And again, this is something that we discussed a lot in the morning, because moving on towards circular economy requires working across sectoral, disciplinary, and spatial boundaries, but also administrative levels. So it really requires all stakeholders related to a given, for example, value chain to be involved in this. And it requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. And that is extremely challenging. And some of the research to date that we conducted in REPAiR, but also there's other studies that indicate that there are a number of barriers on this transition related to, well, either the novelty and complexity, as I said, or the path dependencies related to pre-existing ways of doing things, linear economies, existing policies and approaches that all create barriers for the transition. So looking at the literature, so we built this tool on building on the sustainability transitions literature, which is quite a big branch of the literature. And increasingly in the recent years, as circular economy became a growing phenomenon and increasingly has become perhaps the new sustainability paradigm, there is a new emphasis in that literature on circular economy transitions. So moving from sustainability transitions to circular economy transitions. And in a nutshell, without diving much into this literature, the idea is on how to go from innovations in niches towards a wider change of the wider social technical regime that can result in a more durable and more wide-ranging change, and also how to upscale those local innovations, how to mainstream this approach, and then trigger a broader change. So there's a growing literature on this topic, as I said, but there remains a knowledge gap. So everyone agrees that we need to do this transition again, but the how question remains unresolved. And this is the gap that we try to bridge to some extent with this work. Because focus in the literature seems to be on the socio-technical aspects of circular economy and then transition towards it, with emphasis on flows, on quantifying those flows, also, which is very needed, as we discussed this morning. But what is missing is some kind of integrative approach that also looks at the social, the institutional aspects, the perceptions of and awareness of stakeholders and citizens, and so on. So we need an integrative approach to make this transition happen. And this is where our tool that is now that we'll present today is coming from. We wanted to address those gaps, and what the tool allows to do is to gain insights into, on the one hand, the steps needed to drive forward this transition towards circular economy, and also to create an enabling environment for it, for this transition. And also where it differs maybe from other tools or benchmarking tools available is that it is based on a co-creative approach. So we aim to involve the stakeholders in a discussion about where we are in the transition, what is the status quo, what are the barriers, and what are the steps to take forward to enact this transition. And we could argue that this approach is qualitative and complementing other existing benchmarking tools, such as, for example, last year's benchmark for circular economy set of indicators proposed by ECORIS. So where this is coming from as well, in terms of like where do we get knowledge and inputs for this? So this builds on the network of the peri-urban living labs of REPAiR project. So there were 6 cases involved, and we built this tool on the basis of the knowledge that we gathered through the inputs from stakeholders into those living labs. So there was a series of workshops in each of the cases involving multiple stakeholders from across the different sectors that you can see here on this diagram on the side of the screen. So public actors from various scales, but also knowledge institutes, private actors, and users of the solutions that were being discussed in those living labs. And the disclaimer that we have to make here as well is that what we are going to present today and discuss today is basically the results of a pilot phase. So we cannot yet say that these are the definitive results. This is something that we've been finalizing up until last month. So we need to do more work. So we invite you just to take the results that we'll present with a pinch of salt, because we need to validate them further. We need to do a bit more research and more sessions with the stakeholders in our living labs to fully validate those results. But we think that would be very useful to get your feedback and ideas on them so far. And also, presenting those preliminary results makes sense because it is a good start of the discussion. Okay, so this takes me to the second part of the session, where we will actually present the tool and what it involves. So we elaborated 4 stages of the transition. We proposed this as, let's say, 4 phases, 4 stages through which transition towards circular economy can unfold. And we begin with kind of ambition to go circular. And that's probably the situation in most of European cities and regions these days. That those ambitions are being discussed and put forward by stakeholders. The second stage would be change in the niche, right? So experimental kinds of development that upset the status quo in a way, that propose innovations, but they remain quite small scale or local and still need to be taken up more broadly, mainstreamed and upscaled. And then the third stage would be accelerating change, where the transition really picks up the pace. And we move from those niche developments towards a wider change of the socio-technical regime. And finally, the end stage would be a mainstream circular economy, where circular economy is really the dominant model. So these are all, of course, ideal types that help us, well, understand that this process. And as you will see, we also kind of considered intermediary steps on this transition path. And then we also elaborated we proposed to consider 4 axes of the assessment of the transition progress. And in each of those axes, there's a number of indicators. We chose between 3 and 4 indicators for each of them that best describe the aspects of the enabling environment that needs to be put in place for the transition to happen along those axes. So these are governance, which is pretty self-explanatory, awareness of citizens, but also of among companies, tools for enabling the transition, and finally, sustainability assessment. And so these are the issues that were also discussed this morning. I think you will find a lot of echoes of this morning discussion as well here. And this is a preliminary result that we got from application of the tool in a set of pilot workshops with stakeholders in the different regions of REPAiR, the urban regions of Page, Hamburg, Ghent, Naples, Amsterdam, and Łódź. And again, here I have to make a disclaimer that these are pilot results, so please do take it with a pinch of salt. We need to still validate that. And here is what it looks like for the whole set of our cases for each of the city regions, and you can see here the differences in on the progress towards that transition between our cases. And this, I think, will be a good basis for discussion today. So I'll let you take that in for another couple of seconds, and in the meantime, I will hand over to Andreas. Andreas, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes. I will continue sharing my screen and changing the slides, but you have to guide me through this with the audio, okay?
Yeah.
With Victor not being there. Oh, Victor's back, I guess, but. Okay, yeah, but I think I'll carry on with the screen sharing, Victor, if that's okay. Okay, Andreas, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, so I'm now explaining to you the axis of governance, and so which is one of the 4 axes. And as you can see in the slide, we made some subcategories within the governance axis. The arenas, that's the first column, arenas of governance, which represent long-term oriented strategic activities and policies. And then the second column are agendas. They are medium-term technical activities like regulations, support tools, and incentives. And then the third column, experiments, eco-innovative solutions for integration across the flows and space. So from left to right, we go from long-term, more strategic, more abstract, to the right, more concrete, short-term, And as you can see, the 4 levels towards transition are the ambition, the niche, accelerating, and mainstream, just like it was explained. And for the first column, for the arenas, this means that, in the first stage, in the ambition, the long-term oriented strategies, activities and policies are being discussed between small group of stakeholders, so it's just a beginning. And then in the niche, the implementation of these strategic activities and policies already started, at least at some of the territory levels, but they cover only a part of the territory and they are not yet integrated vertically or horizontally. We heard this also this morning. Vertically means across different governmental levels like national, regional, and municipal, and horizontally, for example, means between different municipalities. And also in the niche level, these strategic activities are not yet integrated with spatial strategies. So they are still a bit on their own. Then in the accelerating level, these activities and policies are implemented at all territorial levels, and they cover most of the relevant territory. And they are integrated vertically across governmental levels or horizontally or across policy sectors. While in the mainstream, we have reached all this. So this means that the strategic activities and policies are in place at all territorial levels. They cover all the relevant territory and they are integrated vertically across those levels and horizontally across administrative boundaries. And also they are implemented across the policy sectors in collaboration with knowledge and economic sectors and with citizens. So you heard this also in this morning, this also could be translated into triple or quadruple helix. Moving to the next column, to the agendas, which are the medium-term technical activities. For the ambition level, they are emerging, they are being discussed, while in the niche, they are in place at some territorial levels and in some of the territory, but their impact remains limited to selected policy sectors. And then going to the accelerating line, this means that the medium-term technical activities are in place at all territorial levels, cover most of the relevant territory, but they only cover some of the relevant policy sectors. And then again, in the mainstreamed line, these technical activities are in place at all territorial levels, cover all the relevant territory, creating an enabling environment for the transition. So that's the ideal status. And then going to the experiments, we heard also a lot about this in this morning. We call them eco-innovative solutions for integration across floors in space. In the ambition level, they are still isolated. Most of the innovations are concerned only with the improvement of waste management. Also, this was discussed quite a lot this morning. While in the niche level, we are moving a step further. The eco-innovative solutions are emerging based on the R strategies, so reuse, refuse, and so on. Predominantly in the form of industrial symbiosis. And in the accelerating level, these solutions reach a critical mass. They emerge in form of circular urban and regional development initiatives. For example, spatial planning is integrated into circular economy, and also in some examples of innovative solutions like circular business parks or circular neighborhoods. And then in the mainstream level, these solutions are fully spatially integrated and considered as a standard. So they are not an experiment anymore, but they are the standard. And they have reached critical mass, cutting across material flows, and also they are integrated within spatial strategies across different scales. So that was now like the theory that we were thinking about how to, and these are also the questions that we were asking to the stakeholders in the 6 different regions. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the Hamburg example. So we were a very small group in Hamburg, so this is not representative at all, but we will replicate this in the next step, discuss it with other persons. And here the Hamburg examples show that, yeah, from 1 to 4 we could score, and we scored all 3 dimensions in 2. Maybe we were a bit self-critical, but we were discussing a lot. And in the case of Hamburg, for the arenas, I gave the example of the Hamburg Climate Smart City strategy. So we have a climate strategy, but until now, circular economy it's not a pillar of this strategy. It is mentioned in different chapters, but it's not a full chapter. And also Hamburg does not have a climate action, a circular economy strategy, like for example Amsterdam. So we said, okay, we are there are policies about concerned with circular economy, but it's not a full strategy yet. So Hamburg is more on the way to develop this, and the topic of circular economy is considered as something where we need more strategic approaches. And then for the agenda, this is an example from the construction and demolition sector. So there are tools and policies to improve avoidance of waste in the sector, and also to reuse and recycle. But it still remains a bit, the different instruments are not always well connected. So there's still, there are many good instruments that are singular, but there's a need to connect them more. And the third example is in Hamburg, we have quite many bunkers from the Second World War. This is an example of an initiative that is reusing this bunker to produce energy with solar panels and so on, and also with an urban gardening project. You don't see it so well, but you can imagine maybe, and they do a food sharing and so on. So it's a initiative that is combining different approaches. But still, these experiments remain niches. So they are not, or they're more than a niche, but they are not. There could be more, and also the city is interested that such initiatives could be replicated in other areas. And then going to Ghent, I think I need to speed up a little bit. If you go to the next slide, to Ghent, we have in Ghent there were a bit more people discussing about the topic, and in Ghent, I don't know, I still see Hamburg. Could you go to Ghent?
It's already showing Ghent on my screen.
Okay, then. Okay,
Ghent.
Now it's here also. It arrived in Hamburg. Thank you. So in Ghent, there are Ghent, like Hamburg, scored everywhere with a 2. So they also said they might be a bit self-critical. So there's a lot in the governance field, a lot going on in Ghent. So for the arenas, there are regulation at different scales, and also the circular economy is in the responsible of the Department of Economy. So there is a place where these topics are managed. But the stakeholders in Ghent said that it's not yet well enough integrated across other policy sectors. So it remains a bit in the pillar of economy. And then for the agendas, there were interesting examples given. So there's, for example, there are calls for circular projects, and there's also a so-called Green Deal for circular construction. But the stakeholders said, it still remains a bit too singular, so it could be better connected. But it also has to be said that in the agenda part, the stakeholders said it's between 2 and 3. So they already said, we are approaching towards 3. And then in the experiments, we see a picture of the new dock, which is a new neighborhood that is built on a former harbor site, with very interesting ideas, using wastewater, combining it with the waste management, and so on. And but also there it said, it's a good example, but how could it be replicated elsewhere? And but they are also important to show that things are possible. Okay, I think I leave it here.
Thank you, Andreas. I will now hand over to Gilda on to cover awareness.
Martin. Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. I will focus on awareness among citizens and companies on the transition to circular economy. As you can see now, we will explore the logic of this axis that is divided into 4 dimensions. The first one is corporate awareness, so awareness by companies, awareness towards wastegate, towards policy implementation, and awareness in ordinary life practices. The 4 dimensions are assessed according to the 4 stages of transition. So we go from ambition to be circular to mainstreamed circular economy. Let's start from the first dimension. So corporate awareness refers to the recognition and integration of environmental concerns into companies' decision-making processes. We start with the condition of low corporate responsibility in separate waste collection to the voluntary application of a green strategy and education programs on circular economy, to the corporate commitment to reduce packaging, up to the integration of reused materials in production when we arrive to a mainstreamed level of awareness. The second dimension and column is awareness towards wastegate. It is citizens' awareness about wastegate potential to become resources. The first step to achieve circular economy transition implies enhancing citizen awareness of discarded areas in their region in order to change their perceptions about them. Such an accretive consciousness, when mainstreamed, could trigger shared vision of development useful to launch wastegate regeneration processes in which citizens are involved. So in this case, we go from recognition of discarded areas to commitment at the last stage. The third dimension is awareness towards policy implementation. It is citizens' awareness of possibilities provided by the policy framework on circular economy. If in a first stage, citizens are interested in the framework of circular economy rules and measures made possible by public policies, then they become informed and try to experiment with circular economy opportunities within policy making. Growing awareness, accelerating awareness can modify customs and habits, and when mainstreamed, can promote shared circular processes in which the gap between policies and the city is bridged, and citizens are able to suggest new challenges for policies. Then the last one, awareness in everyday practices. It implies at the first stage to start thinking about potential of discarded objects and discarded materials. We talked a lot this morning about this, and the use of separate waste collection. At the second stage, experiments in the recycling of materials and experiments in the field of education. These experiments become growing, and finally people are actively involved in circular economy practices and are open to new challenges. So this is the general framework in which we are discussing, and now we are trying to give you 2 portraits of 2 city regions. The first one is Naples and the second one is Pécs in Hungary, always in the field of awareness, of course. So let's go to the Naples case and let's see, first of all, the case of corporate awareness. In this case, the score is 2, if we want to use this scoring we had with the survey. We are in a niche condition. Looking at companies' awareness, we are in front of a fragmented patchwork of practices. Some companies are recycling waste fraction and are producing recycled aggregates, as you can see in the first image, thus following a virtuous path. On the contrary, other companies are not experimenting with the resources recycle, or even are not compliant with rules or measure on waste collection. So there are many differences in this field. As for awareness towards wastegate, the score is the same too. So even in this case, Naples can be assessed as niche. Why? In particular, the city of Naples is working to regenerate discarded areas with citizens' support as a strategy to assure maintenance and care for urban places. This is true both for heritage former abandoned areas and for peripheral wastegapes. Citizens are committed in some experiences of wastegape regeneration. So awareness is rising in this field. Awareness towards wastegape in Naples is closely related to citizens' awareness towards policy implementation. But I will explain now why the score here is 1.33. We are in the middle between the ambition to overcome a linear economy and the niche. Citizens are interested in the policy framework on circular economy, but not completely aware of how they can be actively involved in it. Although some of their actions are in the circular economy policy framework, they are not conscious about this. See, for instance, the case of the management of common goods in Naples. That is a really virtuous case. But if you ask, most of the people will not use the framework of circular economy in order to describe this case. Finally, as for awareness on circular economy in everyday practice, the score is 1.5. Here you see a map of waste-conscious behaviors based on the Eurobarometer survey on public attitudes to waste management and resource efficiencies in Europe. The greener the region, the higher the waste-conscious behavior score. Red regions are the less conscious, and Naples, as you can see, is orange. Now, going to Patch's portrait, we observe, as for companies' awareness, it seems that Patch can be assessed as niche. The score is 2. The most of the companies has a voluntary green strategy and a related education program. Most of the smaller companies use the ISO Quality Management System certificate. In most of the companies, the sustainability is integrated into the corporate social responsibility strategy. But you see, the picture is really different from that observed in Naples. About the awareness towards wastegape, the score is 4. The reason is that Patch had a lot of brownfield sites due to its mining past, but since the 90s, they have been revitalized, usually through citizen involvement and participatory processes. As for awareness towards policy implementation, the score is 1. We have no circular economy planning on local governmental level in patches. That's why people are usually hardly involved in this planning. And if we look at awareness in ordinary life practices, the score is 2. There are new campaigns in social media addressed to launch unpackaged stores, but there are only 3 stores providing package-free purchases. More and more people are starting to use their own package for purchasing goods, but this practice is still at an early stage. This attitude is confirmed by everyday waste behavior map, as in this case. As you can see, patch has a low score and is red. Then I finished with these 2 portraits, and I think that now Victor.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Gilda. We hand over to Victor now to discuss the tools. Victor, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, if we would like to achieve a transition, even in governance or even in a circular economy, certainly we need tools that help social and technological transition for decision makers. So that's why during the project, we also use the tools, and we thought that these tools can also be useful to evaluate and to include in this evaluation or the assessment, because it says how the decision making is supported. So, as you know, there are several tools for measuring the circular economy and the situation, what is going on in a given region. One of them is the material flow analysis. That is a common methodology. We also use it in REPAiR, and based on this, we thought that the using method of material flow analysis can be one of the indicators in this axis of tools or tool. The different levels represents how often and where in the policy planning the MFA is used. For instance, in the ambition phase, it's used indeed, but just for some materials and for energy flows, while during the phase of mainstream circularity, it can be used in a real time. So there is available real-time material flow analysis actually for everyone, or at least for the decision makers. Having regarded the stock, we thought that is also important. That's why we have chosen the second indicator. It's not a common nowadays, but we think that it would be a really good tool for supported decision making. It relates to the, let's say, the urban mining. This means that whether a map, we have a map for the city or for the region that shows the potential of resources on the long term. For instance, in the buildings in the end of the life cycle, or whatever you have in a city. The levels here refer how details these maps, how often they are used, and how much it is integrated into the whole planning process, spatial planning process. The third one, it's an indicator coming from the so-called peri-urban living laboratories, our living labs that we used in the REPAiR, and living lab preparatory workshop, let's say, for planning, including circular economy related planning, and we think that is really important. So in this indicator, this aspect is appearing. The different level represents the deepness of the integration of stakeholders in that kind of living laboratories, the preparation and co-creation phase of a circular project. So if we go to the next slide, that shows some examples from the Amsterdam metropolitan area. Having regarded the flow, we can see that the score is 2. The reason is that in the case of AMA, quite detailed material flow analysis has been made due to the available data. There was 2 steps. The first data gathering process, there was an was a first picture about the MFA, and then after that there was a good opportunity to get a higher resolution data for the year of 2016 by the London, sorry about my pronunciation, by the Landelik Märtund Elvastofan, that is waste management organization that can collect the data. So this database provides the most complete data, which type of waste is collected, from which company, by whom it is collected, and where the waste is sent to further handling. On the other hand, at the bottom you can see the stock that with a score of 3. Stock is also an important aspect at AMA. The company of VAG Technology and Design, with the cooperation of different universities and think tanks, created a map that includes the buildings of Amsterdam and shows where steel and copper and aluminum and lead can be found. So it is a really urban mining map relating to the built infrastructure. And I think that in circular economy, you do not only want to know which streams enter and leave the city, but also how much is saved and stored. So I think this is also important, and this is a good example from Amsterdam. Having regarded the co-creation, many stakeholders, companies and decision makers from business life attended at the living labs. So and also Evelyn from the Mayor Office of Amsterdam, you saw in the morning session, Evelyn Jonkov was also presented in the pool and helps us and use the results in their planning. I mean the planning of Amsterdam circular strategy. So I think it was a really co-created process. That's why we thought that this is also a good example from Amsterdam. Having regarded the Łódź case, the flow score is 1. The reason is that Łódź had the data only for household waste. So, but they are used that, and but unfortunately there was no MFA data for companies or stores or organizations. Having regarded the urban mapping or the urban mines, with the colleagues in Łódź didn't find any initiation try to map the urban mines for potential further use in the long term. Actually, it was the same in other cases, for instance, in Page. So it's not a common tool at the moment, but I think, and we think that is also important. Having regarded the co-creation, it got a high score because the EU cohesion policy program, both in Poland and in Łódź, puts the waste management and the circularity quite high on the agenda. So, because there's a lot of funding, certainly, and people are really aware and really enthusiastic to use this and really aware of circularity. Also, many NGOs were engaged in the debate in the living labs, so stakeholders acquired interests in this field. And now, Martin, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Victor. So I will close this this part with a few words on the last axis, which is that of sustainability assessment. So we heard a lot about this already in the morning, about this kind of comprehensive sustainability assessment. But here in this tool, we look at several issues as well related to this, not only about the data, which is one component, but also stakeholder engagement, for example, and the degree to which the assessment is done in an integrated way across the pillars of sustainability and geographical scales. So just in a nutshell, the logic of this axis, that we have those 3 indicators: data availability, stakeholder involvement, and comprehensive sustainability assessment. And for the data availability, on the path from ambition to mainstreamed circular economy, we basically built from a situation where there is limited amount or hardly any amount of data on waste management, so that we set this indicator again as a kind of guideline for under 20% of primary data is available, and then 80% has to be filled. The gaps has to be filled with data from other sources like literature, databases, and so on. So as a result, many approximations have to be made, and there are also many problems with confidentiality of data, with, for example, companies not willing to share this data and keep it to themselves. And then the further we go towards the transition, the more data is available, the less gaps there are. So there's less and less approximations that are being made, and therefore it's more precise. And also we're going towards a situation where data is available on an open access basis and fully available in a kind of mainstream situation. Now, so in that kind of mainstream situation, let's say more than 80% of the data would be available, and only about 20% of the data is based on kind of approximations on the basis of gaps being bridged with other sources of information. On stakeholder engagement, basically the logic is that we go from hardly any involvement of stakeholders in the data collection towards involvement of stakeholders in more and more kind of aspects, elements of impact assessment, so that by the end, in a kind of situation of mainstream circular economy, the stakeholders are involved actively at multiple steps of the sustainability assessment studies. For example, not only about kind of data sourcing, but also interpretation of results, right, for the purpose of decision making. And the last indicator is the comprehensive sustainability assessment. So how integrative and comprehensive that is. So in a starting position, we kind of look for waste management system assessment, but only for one pillar of sustainability. So for example, either social or economic, or environmental, and only one spatial scale. So for example, only regional or only local. And then the further down we go, the more the pillars are included, so social, economic, and environmental, and more spatial scales are included, so that at the end, in a kind of situation where circular economy is mainstreamed, the sustainability assessment is comprehensive and aggregates results from the 3 pillars of sustainability across multiple spatial scales, and eventually providing also a single score, providing decision support for policymakers that is kind of easy to understand and clear. So to give you some examples, I will go very quickly through that. This is for PECH. So we see, well, data availability score was deemed to be 3, stakeholder engagement also 3, so we are kind of in this accelerating phase, accelerating change, whereas comprehensive sustainability assessment between 2 and 3. So this was kind of undecided or kind of on the way towards 3. So just very briefly, what justified those scores? So on data availability, so from the early 2000s, there has been a lot of open access platforms with data on waste management available with GIS based maps and a number of indicators on air quality, waste management, nature protection. So it allows for a fairly kind of complete picture. And these data are provided by companies to the ministry responsible for environment. On stakeholder involvement, I guess it is similar to WUCH to some degree, that there's a lot of enthusiasm of stakeholders to take part in sustainability assessment, and this was manifest with the Peri-Urban Living Lab, for example, in PECH that we organized as part of REPAiR. But there's also other initiatives happening there. And finally, on the comprehensiveness of the sustainability assessment, it's between 2 and 3 because under the umbrella of REPAiR, all the 3 pillars of sustainability were considered, and calculated impacts in terms of waste management for the innovative solutions that were discussed in REPAiR. However, it is only based as part of kind of waste management systems, and does not necessarily concern other systems of the city, such as transportation, water supply, retail, and so on. Now, for Amsterdam, about which you heard also a lot this morning, so I can go fast. Well, I think that Amsterdam here is really doing fine. You can see the scores here, they're pretty high. So on data availability, it is on kind of accelerating stage with the growing amount of data available and used, and also being made available on an open access platform. And good example of that is the Amsterdam Circular Monitor that Evelyn Jankov also presented this morning. On stakeholder engagement, the score is free. Probably we can consider it already being mainstream with a lot of involvement of stakeholders in this process. That is not necessarily very new. It has been ongoing for years now. A good example here, well, the image shows you a vision, the cover page of the vision for circular Bouwsloterham neighborhood, which has been kind of a long-established living lab working on circular economy in that particular part of the city. So it's a good example of this kind of engagement of stakeholders in this. But there are many platforms for this, and a kind of co-creational approach becomes the norm based on kind of active involvement of stakeholders. And finally, on comprehensiveness of the assessment, the score is also the highest because of the dominant model that is used as a basis for this assessment, and that covers those environmental, economic, and also social aspects very well in a kind of innovative way. So the idea is that the assessment covers the inputs based on life cycle analysis and their emissions, the throughputs, so the use of materials and emissions from that use, on waste collection, so for example, separation rate, etc. Waste treatment information also on the regional scale, and finally, a set of social indicators concerning welfare, housing, wealth inequality, and health. And that's probably where Amsterdam can be really kind of deemed an innovator. Okay, let's stop sending for the moment. And let's give the voice to the floor and collect some questions from you so far. We've been talking for a long time. We are curious about your reactions so far. And then in the last part of the session, we will kind of engage you in more discussion on specific questions. But if you have some questions for the moment, the time is now to ask them, preferably first via chat, and then Victor will be picking them up.
Yeah, actually, I just picked up some questions. The first was by István Pomázi, and he asked, how would you like to go further towards quantitative assessment with this tool? Maybe István is the first part, but this tool is mainly for qualitative assessment. So Martin mentioned that we know all the quantitative assessment. That's why based on your suggestion, we didn't use the benchmark, the word of benchmark, but it's a kind of assessment. So yeah, so this is a really qualitative. It has of course backward, but also it has a good opportunity to go into deep into the topic. Also, a question came to Gilda, how Naples came to the project, and how the policy implementation awareness can be taken into account. Gilda, can you?
Yes, I read, and I also tried to respond to Lara Maritano, telling her that we could discuss also about this today, because it seems to me to be not completely within this topic, but I can try to give her some first responses about how Naples is in the network, because there was a reasonment thinking to this network, putting together city regions from Northern Europe and city region from Southern Europe, looking at different approach and also stages in the circular economy process. Naples was working mainly on the special dimension of waste, trying to introduce the idea of wasted lands that started to become an important challenge for this project. As for mafia and organized crime, we know and we studied in the first deliverable related to the governance in which I was involved, and Professor Palestino, who studied this phenomena, was the coordinator for UNINA team. And we studied this topic of waste management and also the organized crime involvement in waste management. It was really difficult to explain to all the European regions these problems which affected our region. Now we are in a different situation. This does not mean that organized crime does not exist, but it is not involved in that way inside the waste management. Then about awareness, we were talking about citizen awareness related to policy, to circular economy policies. So it is a different discourse. We know that organized crime is something affecting some urban regions, not only in Italy and not only in Naples. So of course, this is a problem, but it is not, I don't think we can solve it now in this session. I could try to explain better, but it is a long story, and mainly it is better if Lara Malitano is interested to go in deep, we can try to have an exchange on this topic, mainly understanding also her point of view, because, you know, in 2 questions, it is not so easy to have the big picture of it. So it's interesting. I think we can discuss. I don't know if you want to, you can also write me, and we will meet on this topic.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if I responded and if it is okay.
I think so. Thank you very much. And last question maybe for this session is that maybe to Marcin, could the assessment tool be used at other scales as well?
Yes, thank you. It's a question from Laila van Ellen, I guess. So thank you very much for that question. And I guess that the way we kind of approach the tool, that it probably should be used at the urban region or city scale. It would not be really suitable for lower scale, because as you saw, it really puts the emphasis on relations between the scales. In, for example, how a city or an urban region then interacts with developments, with policies, with initiatives, or how does it consider data across those different scales. So whether, well, the regional, national, local scales are also concerned. So yeah, to answer your question directly, I think that probably you would need a somewhat different indicators, for example, to consider the very local scale. But our intention was to propose a tool that would be suitable for urban regions or cities to kind of understand those also interrelations between across the scales. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think from now it's okay, and there is no more question. Yes, Marcin has a question.
I have a question to the audience as well, because as you saw, we made a disclaimer that this is in pilot phase. So we collected the data for what you presented from a pilot application of the tool in workshops, but we need to kind of replicate that further and do some further work. So we would really welcome your feedback on, well, first of all, does it seem useful to you? And what could be improved, and perhaps what could be improved to make it more useful for scholars and practitioners working on this topic of circular economy transitions. So any feedback would be welcome from you. If you have one now, please put it in the chat. And if not, I would suggest that we take a very short break. I noticed that in online setting, we get tired more quickly, right? When participating in online meetings and discussion. So if you have some comments, please make them now or think about them during the break, and let's otherwise meet in 5 minutes, right? So what will be 5 minutes from now? It's 15:07, so let's meet at 13 minutes past 3. Is that okay? All right, so please stay tuned, and then we will continue the discussion in a kind of more interactive way as well after that short technical break. Let's call it. Okay, see you in a bit. Thank you so much for your participation so far.
I cannot hear you, Marcin.
We cannot hear you.
And then I think I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, that works. Thanks. Okay, apologies for this. So I guess we can resume and yeah, engage in a more interactive part also of the discussion. We'll hopefully get some inputs from you as well. So Victor will bring up a slide with a question to you. And I will first introduce it a little bit.
You mean this?
We can't see it, Victor.
What do you mean, the Mentimeter one, or just the PPT?
The
Okay.
slideshow, please.
Okay.
Right.
No?
So if you click twice on the screen on the little window with the slideshow, you will see it larger actually. So Victor, can you please give me the next slide? So maybe you remember, well, in the beginning I mentioned that one of the usefulness of the tool that we proposed, in our opinion, is that it allows us to understand where we are on this transition towards circular economy, understand what is the status quo, but also understand what is blocking progress towards the next steps of the transition along those four axes and the indicators within them. And this could work well through the discussion and interaction with the stakeholders. So bottom line is that for progress on each of those axes of the transition, there are specific barriers, and we mentioned them as place-specific because they would differ slightly, or a lot actually, depending on the place and depending on the spatial, cultural, economic, social, environmental conditions. And this means also that in order to address those barriers, we need place-specific solutions. And hopefully this tool could be a first step towards doing just that, identifying those barriers and addressing them later. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the REPAiR project, at an earlier stage of the project, we also investigated those barriers in our living labs with stakeholders. And well, this is the list, let's say, of headings, of topics under which one could classify those barriers. So political, economic, social, technological in some cases, environmental, legal, and organizational. So we need to identify those barriers for each of those indicators in order to progress. And this is where we would like to have your input as well into the discussion. And this is where we will try to experiment with some online tools. Victor, can you move forward, please, with the slideshow? So the question to you would be, what are the main barriers for transition towards circular economy in your region? So we would like you to ponder that question for a minute, and then use your mobile phone or your web browser on the computer or tablet, and go to menti.com. You can see the address indicated there on the slide, and type in this code 3642770, and that will take you to poll where you can give us some answers on that question. And we would like you to please give us an answer, but mentioning in the beginning to what aspect of this, which axis of the transition does the barrier refer to? So you can see the example here. Governance axis, and then, well, weakness of the regional tier of government, and also then at the end indicate where it is. So depending on the place where you are based. So we have 25 people in this session. I think we can have quite a variety of places, and we can have a discussion on this. So please do that, and let's see what you come up with. We'll give you a bit of time to respond to that, and you can give us multiple answers as well. So Victor, maybe now we can bring in the screen from the Mentimeter.
Actually, I did. You can't see?
We can still see the PowerPoint.
Okay.
We see the same. Nothing now.
What about now?
Yes, now we see it.
Okay.
So again, you can click twice on this to maximize the screen. And I see that some issues are coming up already, some of the barriers for governance, actually. If you could also indicate at the end the place where you observe this barrier, so the place where you are based, basically. That could be helpful. And then please give us a little bit more detail also. You know, why is this a barrier? What sort of organizational and economic barriers do we see? For example, someone brought up this one. Okay, we got an example of a legal barrier from Amsterdam. Okay, I think we can discuss some of those now, because then I think if we add more, the ones from the top will be disappearing as well. So thanks a lot for the input so far. So we got some, well, the legal barriers. I guess that this could be on the level of governance. I guess the example from Amsterdam, that there's lack of legislation in place that requires resource management levels for construction. So I guess that this is about kind of facilitating circular processes in the construction sector, indeed. Someone else from Naples brought an awareness problem in terms of lack of in education in circular economy. Then we have an example of also concerning awareness from Newcastle upon Tyne. Circular economy isn't a well-known concept. The focus lies more on carbon footprint. That's also an interesting, and I guess that relates a little bit to what we've discussed in the beginning about the novelty of that concept. And interestingly, we have an example from India as well, from Mumbai, concerning governance access as well. Unregulated and informal resource management systems. And that's a very interesting one, I can tell you, because I think it could relate, well, it is a barrier, but maybe also there could be some opportunities there. Maybe I'm not well informed about the case of Mumbai, but as far as I could gather from the literature and the debates, that in places where there are deep inequalities, like in the case of Mumbai, there is scope for actually using the already existing circular practices there. So that's maybe more on the kind of awareness in terms of that the use of waste as a resource is a common thing, but perhaps it's not regulated indeed and not incorporated into policy making. I'm not sure if that's exactly the point that you were made, but that's quite an interesting issue. And then we got also one complete unawareness of some companies who still don't believe how much money and resource they would save thanks to the transition of a circular economy. That's an interesting one as well. I wonder from which region is that coming, or which city? This question. Then we have an example from Dresden in Germany, also about awareness, misunderstandings of on the incineration of badly sorted waste. Why should I sort? They burn it anyway. And that's a very good point as well, that I think many of the people from Amsterdam or the Netherlands will recognize, with a high rate of incineration of waste, which creates that kind of incentive not to segregate, actually, not to separate waste. Someone also, unfortunately, we don't know from where, brought the question of corruption and kind of political focus on winning the election, whereas circular economy strategies could be for the long term, right? And corruption. An example from Utrecht as well. Good management, old infrastructure. Okay. I wonder what's behind that, the topic as well. What sort of infrastructure you're talking specifically about here. Lack of political will and low public support. And finally, many people have lost faith in the government. So when talking about these new issues, not many are interested in listening, nor in having, I can't see the end of this message, I guess. Good. Yeah, would others like to say something about this? Do those barriers seem familiar to our cases in REPAiR? Gilda?
Yeah. Sorry, Marcin.
I was asking if you had some reactions, if those barriers that are being brought up seem familiar to our discussions in REPAiR.
Barriers seem familiar. Sorry, I cannot respond now, Marcin.
Okay, how about Victor or Andreas?
Yeah, if I may, yes, we have a similar position around incineration that we saw in Dresden, if I remember, yes, relating to Budapest. In Hungary, there are not so many incinerator plants, but there is a big one in Budapest, and it makes a lot of opportunity. On the other hand, incineration, for instance, in REPAiR region, there are 2 cement factories, and they use rested waste and unsorted waste for burning, for co-firing in the production of cement. And it has also quite a big opposition from the local stakeholders, and not the local stakeholders, but the local everyday person, let's say. So because the lack of information. So we have a very similar example from here.
Okay, Andreas, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I think that the aspect that was mentioned about that many companies don't see the potential of circular economy yet is quite an important one. And I think one problem is that many companies don't have they do their business, their daily business. So to think about how to organize flows and how to think if the waste that they produce now could be used by someone else as a resource, I guess it's very often just a problem of capacity that these companies don't, I mean, they do their business and they don't, this would require quite a strategic thinking of companies, at least of smaller and medium ones. And I think there's a lot of potential to think about also what could a city or a region do, or what could, for example, chambers of commerce or business associations, company associations do to support the circular thinking of companies and to to show good examples and to inspire companies that it could be also a business model or new business models, or also a strategy to diversify your economic strategy as a company. So I think there's a lot of potential in this.
Okay, thanks. I see that there's more examples coming in on governance, for example, from Netherlands as well. Dutch government setting goals for 2030, 2050, but then supporting highly unsustainable companies like KLM. This also compromises regional efforts. So indeed, there's this question of also commitment and consistency of agendas and strategies across policy sectors and scales. But again, I think that this touches upon some of the issues we discussed in the beginning about path dependencies and how difficult this transition is because of those path dependencies, like support to a major public operator of flights. And one more from Italy. At the moment, people are so afraid about the present, losing jobs, no money due to COVID, that talking about long-term issues such as the planet doesn't seem to interest some citizens who are worried about the other issues. And I think that that's also a very, very good point. And this is something that I wanted to ask you also about, because this is also an issue that came up this morning, right? And what about COVID? I think it was Paolo De Martino who asked this question in the morning. And we cut the discussion short because the session ended. But
this is an interesting point.
How circular economy could kind of be part of a recovery after COVID, in a way, and whether it could be part of the answer to the crisis. Gilda, you have a point there.
No, maybe I think this is an interesting point. This relationship, putting together these two concepts, and we had. I think some experience during COVID about about some practices that are in the field of circular economy, while we were not conscious of doing something in this field. No? Because I think that we used mainly materials and products we already had available. We tried to do things by ourselves. So some everyday life practices were reflecting a circular economy culture, I think, while not everybody was aware about this. This is why also this morning when there was this question by Paolo, I was starting thinking about this, and now I find here this question, and I think we should reflect more about the relationship with pandemic and circular economy concept.
Yeah, thank you, Gilda. I don't know if you would agree with me, but it seems to me that this could be the next topic to explore for us.
Yes, of course.
The social dimension, the social potential of circular economy.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
And I think we also continued those discussions with Evelyn during the lunch break in situ in Parkhaus Schweiger. I see there's a question also from Maciej Kowalczyk, from our partner in which the social context is necessary to bring about change in everyday habits. There's a great readiness for pro-environmental behavior in Poland. However, no management mechanisms in this direction are visible. And apart from COVID-19 in Poland, we currently have a roadmap for the circular economy, which does not really have specificities in it. So I think that also this could relate somehow to the earlier comments that there's a lack of kind of longer-term direction thinking about the policy there. So that is also a point that we could relate to. Okay, I guess that thank you very much for your inputs. I think that gives us a lot of food for thought there, and the future direction of research. And by the way, we can continue this conversation later on as well, if you're thinking about future projects or collaborations. But I guess we have one more question for you as well. So let's ask Victor to put us on to the second question. And again, we would like you to go to Mentimeter, again, menti.com, use the same code, And please give us some tips on how can we overcome those barriers. And now, before you do that, please, it's important that you mention a little bit, at least the field in which, so the axis, so governance, awareness, tools, or sustainability assessment, so that we know what the tip is for which barrier it is. So let's wait for some answers. I'll try to put in some too myself. On mute. So I start. So someone said that the transition from a linear mindset to a circular mindset is a solution that could kind of be really kind of one solution to solve all problems, and that's probably true, because we see that this kind of being stuck in this kind of linear mindset is something that affects both the decision makers, politicians, but also citizens. The question is, how do we do this? How do we move forward to change those mindsets? If there are some good ideas on this, please put them in. Myself, the point that I made is the one in the middle on governance plus awareness, because I think that at least in the Southern and Eastern Europe, where a lot of EU cohesion policy money is flowing in, there are real opportunities there to put this issue more prominently on the political agenda, on the policy agenda, sorry, and use the funding available to explore the potential for driving circular economy, and in particular its social dimension as part of the recovery after the pandemic. On awareness, someone proposed as well, I think rising awareness on value creation will help some of the governance barriers concerning economical gain, also in a post-COVID world. Again, this is something I think we can agree with, definitely, but the question is how to do it. Where do we begin, huh? To do this. There's a comment on tools as well, a tip, taking care of differences in co-design processes in Italy. I'm not sure if it's entirely clear what it means, what sort of differences are being mentioned here.
I think I think it is differences among actors. in participatory processes that sometimes are completely forgotten during these processes, and some people does not have voice while should have.
Yeah, so it kind of...
I think this is related, I don't know, to some question also this morning came from the audience about differences and taking care about justice, just processes.
Yes, so...
Maybe, I'm not sure, but this is...
But this issue becomes more and more relevant, right, with the incoming crisis.
Justice, yes.
I guess. Okay, someone also mentioned here schools, and beginning with kids, our future kind of users and decision makers and active citizens. So that's where we should begin educating the citizens, and I think that's a very good tip.
Yes.
Highlight good practices from governments and companies. Yes, so create a kind of database of good practices. I think that this could be emerging, but I'm sure that Victor would agree with me here, that good practices are great, but you have to take some caution, exercise some caution when learning from them, right? Because of the context specificities in which those practices emerged. So in the REPAiR project, we also studied that question, how good practices travel, and how to make sure that they are kind of adapted in the process to fit the local context. Governance awareness, social and economic policies to redesign the... Victor, could you shift the screen down a little bit, if it's possible? To redesign the existing unregulated systems by incentivizing circularity and ensuring fairness for citizens in India. Yes, so kind of moving forward to kind of regulate those systems. And again, ensuring justice and fairness in the process. Someone mentioned as well on the governance front, multi-level governance and cross-sectoral planning, which is a kind of perennial problem. We all agree it's needed, but how do we again do this? Right. And on awareness, raising corporate awareness about the economic financial benefits, both direct income returns and indirect competitive advantage from more circular business model or business cases, right? So they are creating incentives there, right, for companies to do it. Introducing and implementing effectively laws and taxes on extended producer responsibility, carbon taxes and others. So again, it's a point about incentives, about shifting the incentives, which currently there are kind of hardly any positive incentive towards more circular behavior among companies, right? And finally, information flyers, posters, printed rubbish bins, etc., should not only come in the national language of the country, but also in English and the languages of most immigrant groups, as awareness rising is mostly done in school. I think that's also a very good point, particularly in places where the societies are increasingly mixed and diverse, to engage actually groups in this process. And again, I think it boils down to kind of procedural justice and fairness and inclusion. And maybe just the final one, and I think then we have to close. The transition from a linear mindset to a circular mindset is mostly personal movement to practice, to create value for people, the planet, and profit in our daily life. And I think that that's an inspirational message with which we can close this, right? That we need to begin from ourselves and our own behavior. And I guess that, I don't know if you agree, but working on those topics as academics and researchers or like being involved in projects like REPAiR really did change that for many of us, right? I give you a silly example. But most of us have adopted the reusable bottles and cups in the process of working on REPAiR, as there has been this kind of peer pressure to do this, and definitely our own awareness has been developed in the process. So there's definitely something to it. Okay, so let's leave this at this message. And Victor, if you could bring back the slideshow, then I will close with a few remarks. Let's go. Thank you very much for your interest. It's been great.
Just a minute. Yeah.
Could you switch back to PowerPoint slides, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
In a minute.
We are sorry about the technical difficulties there. It is also a new platform for us. Okay, it's coming up. So just in conclusion, so the tool that we proposed is a novel assessment tool for, I think, creating an enabling environment for the transition towards circular economy. And the point is here really that in order to reach this kind of mainstream circular economy that is cutting across scales, sectors, participatory, engages stakeholders, then we need to kind of think across those 4 axes. So governance, awareness, tools, and sustainability assessment to understand where we are also. So it is an integrative approach, but also a co-creative approach because it's based on discussion and deliberation and knowledge co-creation with stakeholders, right? It's a participatory process as well to identify the status quo, the barriers, the next steps. And ultimately, once we have more robust results, it will allow for comparisons across regions and lesson drawing and knowledge transfer. And also one could imagine that you could, for example, look at other regions that are at a higher stage of this transition on a particular axis, let's say governance. And then one could start to investigate what have been the steps that were done to reach that level and what is missing in our own region to achieve that. So, but obviously the tool still needs further testing in the next steps, which we hope to undertake in the coming months. And the important message to close to you is that you and your region can also be involved. So we would be happy to have some conversations with you as well later on, and to join the conversation and perhaps test the tool in your region by organizing such a workshop with stakeholders. This is definitely something that we can do, and the technology today, kind of catalyzed by the pandemic, makes it all the more possible. So let's use that opportunity. I would like to thank all the speakers and the participants for great inputs, comments, and questions. Thanks also for those comments that were put in the chat. I think we'll all take them on board. And feel free to get in touch with either of us, me, Gilda, Victor, or Andreas, or actually also Alex Vandel and Ariane Ake, who are involved in the making of this tool, and Suellen Telman as well, to discuss that further. So thank you for your attention, and see you next time. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.